2 hours after I gave birth, my husband looked at our newborn son and said, "I am not signing anything." I was still shaking from labor. My hair was damp against my neck. There was an IV taped to my hand, a hospital bracelet biting softly into my wrist, and a tiny baby sleeping against my chest like the world had not just split open and changed shape. The nurse had placed the birth certificate worksheet on the tray table. Father's full legal name, signature, acknowledgement, that was all. I looked at Daniel, expecting tears, expecting trembling hands, expecting him to hold our son the way he had promised he would when he spent 9 months talking to my stomach in that careful, practiced voice. Instead, he leaned close enough that the nurse outside the curtain could not hear him and whispered, "I already have a real son with Marissa. Your child is not getting my name, my inheritance, or my family." For 1 second, the hospital room went silent in a way machines should not allow. I could still hear the monitor, the oxygen, hiss, the hallway wheels. But inside me, everything stopped. I did not scream. I did not throw the clipboard. I looked down at my baby, at his soft mouth opening in sleep, at the tiny fist resting against my hospital gown, and I smiled in a way Daniel hated because it meant I had stopped pleading. Then I whispered, "Remember this moment." He stood straight, face tightening, like he thought exhaustion had made me harmless. The next morning, a nurse came back with a sealed hospital file. She looked at Daniel, then at me, and said, "Mrs. Mercer, there is a problem with your husband's other child's records." Daniel's face turned white before she finished the sentence, because he had spent 9 months hiding a second family. But the hospital had just found the document that would expose why he had been so desperate to reject mine. My name is Elena Mercer. I am 32 years old, and before that morning I believed humiliation had a limit. I thought there were some rooms where even cruel people lowered their voices out of respect for what a body had survived. A delivery room should be one of those rooms. Daniel and I had been married for 4 years. He was 38, a real estate developer from an old local family that treated property like bloodline and bloodline like law. The Mercers owned apartment buildings, retail plazas, 2 storage facilities, and a reputation for appearing generous while never giving anything without strings. His mother, Claudia Mercer, called herself traditional. By traditional, she meant she believed wives were decorative until useful, mothers were holy until inconvenient, and daughters-in-law should be grateful for being tolerated. When I became pregnant, the family changed. Not toward me, toward the baby. Claudia sent monogrammed blankets before my first ultrasound. Daniel started talking about names that belonged to his grandfather, his great-grandfather, his family trust. At 16 weeks, when the blood test showed I was carrying a boy, Claudia cried harder than I did. She put both hands on my stomach without asking and said, "Finally, the Mercer line is safe." I remember laughing awkwardly. I should have been afraid. From that day on, my pregnancy became a family project. Claudia asked about my diet, my doctor, my sleep, my weight, my blood pressure, my prenatal vitamins, my birth plan. Daniel became obsessed with the family trust documents. He said it was normal, wealthy families planned, responsible fathers prepared. A son changed everything. But there were moments. I was tired, pregnant, trained by marriage to distrust my discomfort before I distrusted him, so I kept telling myself that suspicion was hormones. That is how women are taught to bury alarms. Call them hormones, anxiety, jealousy, sensitivity. Anything but information. Marissa Vale entered the story before I knew she had been inside it for years. Officially, she was Daniel's former project manager. 35, divorced, efficient. The kind of woman Claudia described as capable with admiration she never offered me. Marissa had worked on Mercer developments for nearly a decade, then left suddenly 2 years into my marriage. Daniel said she had moved to another firm. Claudia said good staff always move on eventually. Neither of them mentioned she had a child. I first saw the boy in a photo. It was December. I was 5 months pregnant and looking for gift tape in Daniel's home office. His desk drawer stuck. I pulled too hard and a stack of old envelopes slid forward. One fell open. A photo dropped onto the rug. Daniel was standing beside a little boy at a miniature golf course. The boy had dark hair, Daniel's eyes, and a gap-toothed smile. On the back, in blue ink, someone had written, "Nico's 6th birthday. Thank you for showing up this time. M." My heart began to beat in my throat. I told myself there were explanations. Uncle, friend, employee's kid, charity event. Anything. Daniel walked in before I could put it back. His face changed, then smoothed. That is Marissa's son, he said. Why are you in his birthday photo? Because his father is not around. Why does it say thank you for showing up this time? He took the photo from my hand. Alina, do not start a fight over a child. That sentence worked because it made me feel cruel. A child was involved, a fatherless boy, a kind gesture. My pregnant jealousy became something ugly before I could examine it. I apologized. He let me. Later, I found out the photo had been the smallest visible piece of a hidden life. Daniel had paid Marissa's rent through vendor reimbursements. Claudia had met Nico. There were school tuition payments disguised as consulting retainers. A college fund under a different trustee, birthday gifts, medical forms, holiday hotel stays. Daniel had not been visiting job sites on Thursdays. He had been visiting his other family. When I told Claudia I had seen the picture, she did not look surprised. She said, "A generous man has many responsibilities." I asked, "What does that mean?" She smiled. "It means you should focus on staying calm for the baby." The family trust became Daniel's obsession in my third trimester. The Mercer Legacy Trust had been created by Daniel's grandfather. I did not understand all of it, and Daniel made sure it stayed that way. He said the trust provided distributions for direct descendants, protected company shares, and transferred voting power when certain family conditions were met. Claudia described it more simply. The first legitimate Mercer son of Daniel's generation secures the next branch. Legitimate. That word entered the room like a draft under a door. I asked Daniel what it meant in legal terms. He said, old language. Nothing to worry about. But he worried. Constantly. He argued with trust attorneys behind closed doors. He took calls in the garage. He asked my OB for due date documentation twice. He wanted to know whether hospital birth records listed exact time. He asked if the baby could be registered immediately. Then, strangely, in the last month, he began withdrawing. He missed 2 appointments. Said he was busy. He skipped the hospital tour. Said those rooms all looked the same. He stopped touching my belly. Said the baby kicked too hard. One night at 38 weeks, I woke and found him sitting on the edge of the bed staring at me. What? I whispered. He said, do you ever wonder if bringing a child into a broken marriage is selfish? I pushed myself up, heart racing. Is our marriage broken? He rubbed his face. I am tired. Of me? Of pressure. What pressure? He looked toward the dark window. Everyone wants something from me. I thought he meant work, his mother, the trust. I did not know he meant 2 sons. Labor started 4 days later at 3:12 in the morning. My water broke in the hallway on the way to the bathroom. Daniel cursed before he helped me. That should have told me something too. The first word out of his mouth was not. Are you okay? It was not, it is happening. It was a sharp, irritated word, like my body had inconvenienced his schedule. At the hospital, he became performative again. He held my hand when nurses entered, texted updates to family, smiled at the doctor, told me I was strong when people could hear. During the worst contraction, when no one was near, he whispered, "Do not embarrass me today." I turned my head on the pillow and stared at him. Then another contraction took me under. Our son was born at 6:44 p.m., red, furious, alive, 7 pounds 2 ounces. The nurse placed him on my chest, and I cried so hard I could not see his face clearly at first. Daniel stood near the wall, looking at him like a man studying a document for errors. I said, "Come hold him." He did not move. The first 2 hours after birth are not like movies. They are sweat, blood pressure cuffs, fundal checks, shaking legs, newborn measurements, nurses pressing gently on places that hurt, ice chips, forms, messages, and the impossible fact that a whole person is now breathing outside your body. I named him Jonah. Daniel had wanted Raymond after his grandfather. Claudia wanted Mercer as a first name, which I refused so completely that even Daniel stopped asking. Jonah was my father's middle name, a quiet name, a survivor name. Daniel said we could discuss it later. After birth, I did not discuss. I told the nurse, his name is Jonah. Daniel's jaw tightened. That was the first public sign. The second came when the nurse asked if he wanted to cut the cord, and he said no. He claimed he felt lightheaded. Maybe he did. But I had watched him tour construction sites after injuries, stand in operating rooms for donor publicity photos, and hold Claudia's hand through minor dental surgery like a soldier. It was not blood. It was refusal. The third came with the papers. The nurse, Grace, was probably in her late 40s, with kind eyes and the efficient movements of someone who had seen enough family drama to identify storm clouds by posture. She placed the worksheet down and said, "No rush, but when you are ready, we will need both parents' details for the birth certificate." Daniel asked, too quickly, "Does that have to be today?" Grace smiled politely. "We usually start the process before discharge." "I need time." I turned to him. "Time for what?" He waited until Grace stepped out to get more blankets. Then he leaned close and destroyed what was left of us. "I already have a real son with Marissa. Your child is not getting my name, my inheritance, or my family. Your child. Not our child. A phrase can be a knife if placed correctly." I looked at Jonah. He yawned, mouth opening like a tiny pink question. I thought about the photo, the Thursday afternoons, the trust calls, Claudia's legitimate, Daniel's fear about exact birth time. All of it rearranged itself into a shape so ugly I could barely breathe. I said, "Remember this moment." Daniel looked almost relieved. I think he expected collapse, pleading, maybe bargaining. He expected postpartum weakness to make me soft. Instead, I reached for the call button. When Grace came back, I said, "Please note that I am willing to complete my portion of the birth certificate paperwork, and the father is refusing at this time." Daniel's head snapped toward me. Grace's eyes moved between us. Then she said, "Calm as winter. I can document that. That documentation saved me later." So did Grace. Hospital nurses understand things before paperwork catches up. Grace did not ask me to explain while I was bleeding, shaking, and holding a newborn whose father had just rejected him. She simply adjusted my blanket, checked Jonah's latch, and asked, "Do you feel safe with your husband in the room?" Daniel was standing 3 feet away. His face went red. I answered honestly, "No." He laughed once. "Elena." Grace did not look at him. "I am asking the patient." "No," I repeated. Within 10 minutes, Daniel was asked to step into the hallway. He argued. Grace called security without raising her voice. That was when I learned calm women with badges can move mountains. Daniel left, but not before bending close to me one last time. "You have no idea what you are doing." I looked at Jonah. "I do." He slept in the hallway waiting area that night, according to Claudia, who arrived at midnight wrapped in cashmere and outrage. She was not allowed into my room because I told Grace no visitors. Claudia called my phone 17 times. Texted 12. "This is emotional. Do not punish Daniel. Think of the family. The trust requires clarity." "You are making this harder than it needs to be. The trust requires clarity." I stared at that one for a long time. Then I screenshot it and sent it to my attorney. Yes, I had an attorney. Not a divorce attorney then. A trust attorney named Naomi Shaw, who had reviewed a postnuptial document Daniel tried to make me sign 2 months earlier. He said it was estate planning. Naomi said it was a quiet attempt to waive future claims related to family trust distributions and business shares on behalf of me and any child born of the marriage. I refused to sign. Daniel called me paranoid for a week. At 2:10 a.m., Naomi replied to my screenshot. "Do not sign anything. Do not let them take original hospital paperwork. Ask for copies of all birth records. Text me when you are awake." I looked at Jonah sleeping in the plastic bassinet beside me. "I am awake," I whispered. I did not sleep. The next morning at 7:36, Grace came into my room holding a sealed manila file and wearing the expression of someone carrying a match into a gas leak. "Mrs. Mercer," she said quietly. "Risk management asked me to bring this to the unit supervisor, but you need to hear it before your husband does." I sat up slowly. She closed the door. "There is a problem with your husband's other child's records." I did not understand at first. My body was too tired for complicated betrayal. I understood milk pain, stitches, hunger, fear, and the soft weight of Jonah against my chest. Records belonged to another world. Grace sat in the chair beside my bed. "I cannot disclose another patient's protected medical information," she said carefully, "but I can tell you what directly affects your baby's registration and safety." That sentence woke me fully. Safety? Yesterday your husband requested delayed paternal acknowledgement for your son. This morning, another party contacted hospital administration asking whether a prior acknowledgement on file could be used to establish inheritance priority for a different child. Marissa. Grace did not confirm. She did not need to. She continued, "The request triggered review. because the document they referenced was never finalized. It appears there was an attempt years ago to list your husband as father on another child's hospital-related record, but the legal acknowledgement was incomplete, unsigned by the required parties, and flagged by our system because the biological father field was later amended. The room narrowed. Amended to whom? Grace looked pained. I cannot tell you that part, but I can tell you this. Your husband is not legally recognized through that hospital record as the father of the child they are referencing. Jonah made a tiny sound in his sleep. My brain tried to catch up. Daniel had just rejected his newborn because he believed he already had a legally recognized son with Marissa. But the hospital file said he did not. Grace lowered her voice. There is more. Because your husband refused to sign your son's paperwork, and because there were unusual calls from family members about inheritance timing, the unit supervisor contacted legal. They believe someone may attempt to pressure you into delaying registration or changing paternal information. I looked toward the door. Daniel was outside somewhere. Claudia, too, maybe already calling attorneys, already rewriting facts. Grace handed me a smaller packet, not the sealed file. This is yours, your delivery time, your son's birth record worksheet, my documentation that you requested paternal acknowledgement and your husband refused. Security note that he was removed after you stated you did not feel safe. Visitor restriction form. Copies. I took the packet with shaking hands. Why are you helping me? Her face softened. Because men who reject babies 2 hours after birth usually come back later wanting something. I started crying then. Silent tears because Jonah was still asleep. Grace squeezed my shoulder. Do you have someone safe to call? I nodded. My attorney. Good, she said. Call her before you call family. Naomi arrived at the hospital 90 minutes later wearing navy trousers, flat shoes, and the kind of calm that makes nurses trust you. She brought coffee I was not allowed to drink yet, a phone charger, and a folder of her own. She read everything Grace had given me. Asked 3 questions. Took notes. Then called a family law colleague from the hallway. When she came back, her face had changed. Alina, I need to explain something in plain language. Plain language is rarely good news. Daniel has been trying to create the appearance that another child qualifies as his first legally recognized male heir before Jonah. But based on what we know right now, that other child may not be legally his for trust purposes, and your son was born within the marriage with full presumptive legal status unless challenged through court. He said Jonah gets nothing. He may have said that because he needed you frightened enough to delay paperwork. My fingers tightened around the blanket. Naomi continued. The Mercer trust language is old, but not mystical. It does not allow Daniel to choose whichever child he prefers in a hospital room. It recognizes lawful descendants under defined terms. If he refuses acknowledgement, that does not erase the marital presumption. If anything, his refusal and the family's interference create evidence of bad faith. Bad faith. Such a small phrase for a man refusing to hold his newborn. Naomi asked if I wanted Daniel allowed back in. No. Claudia? No. Anyone from his family? No. She nodded and had me sign the visitor restriction form more formally. Then she helped me complete every section of Jonah's paperwork I could complete alone. Father listed, Daniel Mercer. Refusal documented. Legal follow-up pending. Delivery time, 6:44 p.m. At 10:12 a.m., Daniel tried to enter. Security stopped him. Claudia's voice rose in the hallway. This is his child. I almost laughed. 20 minutes earlier, he said Jonah was not. Naomi opened the door and stepped into the hall before I could move. I could not see her from the bed, but I could hear every word. Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Mercer, my client is recovering from childbirth and has restricted visitors. Further attempts to enter will be documented. Claudia said, You have no idea what this family is. Naomi replied, I have read the trust. I have an idea. Silence. Then Daniel, low and furious, Elena is confused. Naomi's voice sharpened. No, Elena is represented. That sentence became the first wall around us. I left the hospital the next day without Daniel. Naomi arranged everything. My sister Carmen picked us up through the discharge entrance. Grace walked us down herself, carrying a bag of formula samples, postpartum supplies, and the kind of fierce goodbye that made me cry again. Jonah was bundled in a blue blanket, unimpressed by inheritance war, asleep with one hand near his cheek. Daniel texted as we pulled away. You are making a mistake. Then, my mother is devastated. Then, we need to handle this privately. Then, you do not understand what Marissa will do. That last one mattered. Not what I will do. What Marissa will do. I forwarded it to Naomi. Carmen drove me to her house instead of mine. She had already set up a bassinet in her guest room and placed a tiny sign on the door that said Jonah's Suite. I laughed for the first time since birth, then cried because laughing hurt my stitches. For 2 weeks, I lived inside a cycle of feeding, bleeding, pumping, legal calls, and learning my son's face. Newborns do not care about betrayal schedules. Jonah woke every 2 hours. He rooted against my chest. He made squeaks like a tiny door hinge. He stared at ceiling fans as if they held government secrets. He needed me completely, and somehow that need did not feel like the need Claudia used as a leash. His need was honest. It did not manipulate. It simply existed. Daniel filed first. Of course he did. Petition for temporary custody access and emergency order preventing removal of the child from the county. He claimed I was emotionally unstable after birth, refusing paternal bonding, and influenced by outside counsel. Claudia submitted a declaration saying I had always been hostile to the Mercer family and had threatened to cut Daniel out before birth. Then Naomi filed my response. Hospital notes, Grace's documentation, security record texts. Claudia's trust message, Daniel's refusal to sign, his statement about having another real son, the incomplete hospital-related record request, the attempted interference with registration, my postpartum medical clearance. Carmen's declaration, visitor restriction, the judge granted temporary physical custody to me, supervised visitation for Daniel pending review, and ordered both parties not to discuss inheritance or trust matters in connection with the child. Daniel hated that, because without inheritance, he had no language for fatherhood. Marissa contacted me 3 weeks after Jonah was born. Not Daniel, not Naomi, me. The message came through Instagram from an account with no posts. Elena, you do not know the whole story. I think Daniel lied to both of us. I need to talk. I stared at it while Jonah slept on my chest. Carmen said, no. Naomi said, do not respond directly. I will contact her. Marissa agreed to speak with Naomi and later with me over a recorded call. Her voice surprised me. I expected smugness, cruelty, competition. Instead, she sounded exhausted. Nico was not Daniel's biological son. He had known that. Marissa had dated Daniel briefly before I met him, then married another man. Nico was her ex-husband's child, legally and biologically. Daniel re-entered her life when Nico was 3, after Marissa's divorce. He played rescuer, paid rent sometimes, bought gifts, told her he loved Nico like his own, told Claudia that Nico might be his, or close enough spiritually, whatever that meant. Claudia became attached to the idea because Nico was a boy, and because she had not yet forgiven me for failing to exist before Daniel met me. Years later, when the trust issue became urgent, Daniel pressured Marissa to revisit old records. He promised financial security for Nico if she cooperated. He told her he needed to show prior paternal acknowledgement, not necessarily prove biology. She thought it was about protecting Nico. Then she learned I was pregnant. Then Daniel told her I was unstable, manipulative, and planning to use my baby to cut everyone out. He said you knew about us, Marissa said. I closed my eyes. Elise, Sloane, Marissa. Different stories, same architecture. Men telling women the wife already knows, already failed, already deserves what is coming. Marissa cried when Naomi read Daniel's hospital statement from my notes. Your child is not getting my name. He said that? She asked. Yes. About my newborn, about Jonah. Marissa went silent. Then she said, Nico is not a weapon, and neither is your baby. That was the first thing she said that I respected. She provided messages, payment records. Daniel's texts about trust priority. Claudia's notes about positioning Nico before the birth. A voicemail from Daniel saying, if Elena's baby is registered first, everything becomes harder. Everything. Not fatherhood. Not family. Asset positioning. Naomi added it to the file. The trust hearing happened when Jonah was 7 weeks old. Not a full trial. An emergency interpretive hearing because Claudia and Daniel's attorneys tried to block certain distributions and voting changes until paternity and heir priority could be clarified. They thought legal language would make cruelty look respectable. They thought old trust words would hide the hospital room. The courtroom was too cold. Jonah stayed home with Carmen because I refused to bring a newborn into a room where adults were debating his value. I wore a black dress that still strained at the chest because postpartum bodies do not care about legal strategy. Naomi sat beside me. Daniel sat across the aisle with Claudia. He looked polished, rested, almost wounded. The judge, Honorable Miriam Voss, had no patience for family theater. Naomi presented the core facts. Jonah was born during the marriage. Daniel was presumed legal father. Daniel refused voluntary paperwork while making statements about another child. Family members contacted hospital administration about prior records and inheritance timing. The other child was not legally recognized as Daniel's for trust purposes, and Daniel's own communications suggested an attempt to manipulate registration and trust interpretation. Daniel's attorney said, "This is a deeply emotional postpartum dispute, being inflated into a trust emergency." Judge Voss looked at him over her glasses. A father refusing to acknowledge his newborn while seeking inheritance advantage for another child is not merely emotional. It is relevant. I looked down at my hands so no one would see them shake. Marissa's declaration was admitted under seal. Grace's notes were reviewed. Claudia's text about the trust requiring clarity appeared on the screen. Naomi asked Daniel one question during limited testimony. "Did you tell your wife 2 hours after birth that you already had a real son with Marissa and that her child would not receive your name or inheritance?" His attorney objected. The judge allowed it. Daniel said, "I was overwhelmed." Naomi waited. "That was not my question." He looked at me once, then away. "Yes," he said. The word was small. The room heard it anyway. Naomi then displayed the trust clause. "Lawful issue born of a valid marriage, acknowledged or presumed under state law, shall not be disadvantaged by unilateral refusal of a parent absent adjudication." I had read that sentence 10 times. It still made my knees weak. Judge Voss ruled that Jonah's status could not be impaired by Daniel's refusal, that no alternate heir claim based on Nico's incomplete record could supersede a child born within the marriage, and that Daniel and Claudia's communications raised serious concerns of bad faith interference. Then she said, "The court will not allow a newborn to be punished because adults attempted to arrange affection around assets." Claudia went pale. Daniel closed his eyes. I breathed for what felt like the first time since the delivery room. After the hearing, Daniel asked to speak to me. Naomi said no before I could. We walked down the courthouse hallway, and he followed at a distance until security looked at him. Claudia did not follow. She sat on a bench, staring at the floor, one gloved hand pressed to her mouth. Outside, Daniel called my name. "Elena, please?" I turned because some part of me needed to see whether there was anything human left in him. He stood near the courthouse steps, tie loosened, eyes red. For once, he did not look like the Mercer heir. He looked like a man who had lost control of the script. "I made a mistake," he said. I almost laughed. "A mistake is forgetting diapers. You rejected our son while I was still bleeding." His face twisted. "My mother was pressuring me. Marissa was threatening legal action. The trust did not whisper in my ear." He had no answer. I continued. "Do you want Jonah or do you want what Jonah represents? That is not fair. No, it is exact." He looked wounded by precision. "Good," he said. "I want to meet him properly. You saw him in the hospital. I was not myself. Neither was I. I had just given birth. I still managed not to abandon him." That landed. Naomi touched my elbow gently, not to stop me, just to remind me I had an exit. I took it. Daniel attended supervised visits later. Some went well, some did not. Jonah was a baby. He cared about warmth, bottles, clean diapers, and steady arms. Daniel cried the first time Jonah wrapped tiny fingers around his thumb. Maybe the tears were real. Maybe they were grief for himself. I stopped trying to sort his soul. The court could manage access. I would manage safety. Claudia requested visitation separately. Denied at first, she wrote me one letter. Naomi read it before I did. It said, "I thought legacy was something to secure. I forgot it was someone to love. I am ashamed." I did not forgive her then. But I kept the letter, not for her. For Jonah, someday if he ever asks whether people can learn too late. The answer is yes. Too late still has consequences. I moved into a small townhouse near Carmen when Jonah was 3 months old. No Claudia, no Daniel, no trust attorneys. No one telling me my baby's value depended on a signature. Just Jonah blinking at the light like he had invented morning. Divorce took almost a year. Daniel fought less after the trust ruling because every fight created more records. Marissa testified in limited proceedings. Nico remained safely outside the Mercer War after Naomi helped Marissa secure written protections preventing Daniel from using him in future trust claims. I sent Marissa one message after that was done. "Thank you for telling the truth." She replied, "I am sorry it took me so long. I understood that more than I wanted to." Daniel's relationship with Jonah became supervised, then structured. He is not the villain Jonah will know from me. That is a promise I made to myself. I will tell the truth when he is old enough, but I will not feed him bitterness in a bottle. A child deserves facts scaled to his age, not a mother's wound poured into his ear. But I kept everything, the hospital notes, Grace's documentation, the text messages, Naomi's filings, Judge Voss's ruling, Claudia's letter, Daniel's admission, not because I want to live inside the pain, because families like the Mercers revise history the way other people update calendars. Jonah will never have to wonder whether his mother imagined it. In the months after the ruling, I learned the difference between a father and a man who wants credit for fatherhood. A father shows up when there is no audience, no trust clause, no inheritance table, no mother watching from the hallway. A father learns the feeding schedule, remembers the diaper size, asks the doctor questions, and understands that a child is not proof of his importance. Daniel was learning slowly, under supervision, under orders, under eyes that no longer mistook charm for growth. I did not confuse effort with repair. I recorded it, watched it, and protected Jonah first every time. Always. Near the end of this video, I want to ask you something directly. I pinned a question in the comments. If your husband rejected your newborn 2 hours after birth because he thought another child protected his inheritance, would you ever let him back into your life? Or only into the child's life under strict rules? Go to that pinned comment and tell me your honest opinion. I want to know where you draw the line between fatherhood and betrayal. And if this story made you think of a woman who was most vulnerable when someone tried to erase her child, stay close to She Chose Herself. Every voice here helps another mother remember that a baby's worth is not decided by the person cruel enough to deny it. 2 hours after birth, my husband said he had a real son. The next morning, the nurse came back with a file. That file did not make Jonah valuable. He already was. It only proved Daniel had no power to make him less so. I did not scream that night. I whispered, "Remember this moment." And he did. So did the nurse. So did the court. So will I.